Afternoon, actually. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday. It's Chat with Mac. We're glad to have you. We're glad you're joining us. Nadeem, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It does feel good to say good evening. You're thinking it's already. I would say good night, but
Good night. Man, like we were saying, we're kind of we're ready to go lay down and put our heads in pillows. It's just that type
yeah.
of thing.
I usually, I have so we have our like internal business meeting and stuff, and so we were having this meeting, and I was like, man, it was so much easier when we just used to live in caves and we didn't have to worry about anything other than our next meal. That was it.
Unfortunately, we got so much other stuff now. The beauty of adulthood. Good Lord.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Well,
so how have you been, Mac?
oh man, just tired as usual. Like it's been decent. We're talking to people. Funny, you should talk about the responsibilities because it seems like now people have to get out of their surroundings in order to work and things of that nature is actually part of what we want to talk about. As far as making sure we have connectivity, or how do we use the computers, our service, whatever, if we don't have connectivity, and especially us in Houston. Lord knows, when these hurricanes, and I'm hoping we don't have any of that because I'm a Chicago boy. I worry about snow. I don't worry about rain and huge hurricanes. But in the case that happens, how are we able to have functionality? We want to talk about that. And you, being the guru of Microsoft, how does that work?
So, couple of things, and this will be helpful for anybody who's using their computers for work or in their personal life. So, a couple of things. One thing is, if you have any type of Office 365 or Gmail or any of the newer services out there, cloud-based services, it should be pretty seamless whether you have connectivity or not. Outlook back in the day, I mean, back from Outlook version 2003, it's had this functionality. If you have Exchange on the back end, it will sync everything that's in your mailbox to your local machine, and then you can access it. So people were using it in airplanes and stuff. And if you send an email out, it will just sit in your outbox until you regain connectivity, and then that email will go out. And that's pretty seamless. Anybody, pretty much everybody knows how to do that. Or even if you didn't know how to do that, you've been doing it and you had the capability to do it.
Right.
So a little tricky part comes in when you have SharePoint, and I know a lot of companies are switching their data into SharePoint. They're moving their data into SharePoint, files and what have you. So when moving to SharePoint, a lot of times I see that people move their personal stuff or what would really go on their home drive in their server. They'll move it to OneDrive. So OneDrive for Business automatically will create a sync on your machine, and it will keep all the files in sync. So if you edit a file while you're offline, it will stay in that OneDrive sync folder. When you gain connectivity, it will reach out and sync that file up to the cloud. And it's pretty seamless. It's just kind of like Outlook. It's very seamless. Now, the tricky part comes in when you have SharePoint. By default, SharePoint lists, which is a fancy word for folders, don't sync to your device. You have to make them sync. And there's a reason for that. So here's the thinking. SharePoint lists can get pretty large. Think about it this way. You can move your entire contents of your shared drive on your server into SharePoint. So that could be, let's say, a 2 terabyte drive, 2 terabytes of data. You don't want to sync that with your little Surface, Microsoft Surface Pro. It's just not going to handle all that data. So that's why by default, SharePoint does not automatically sync to user machines. But you can enable sync. And you know, it'd probably be easier if I showed you real quick. And let me just share my screen and see if I can make it make sense. So I'm just gonna share my screen here, and I'm gonna go into. We'll just open up a new deal here, and just go to like our SharePoint portal. And now let's say in here, let's go into Lounge Docs, and these are just Lounge documents. There's nothing confidential in here. So we'll just go in here, and let's say we want to sync this folder. Now, of course, we may not want to sync all the lists over here because there's a bunch of them. I mean, total, I think in this portal, we have maybe 3 terabytes of data. So we don't want to sync everything. But maybe I just want to sync this one list, which is the Lounge Docs. Maybe I just want to sync this, or maybe I want to go into, you know, like, you know, one of these folders here, like Photo Viewer, and maybe I just want to sync, you know, this guy right here. So just this folder. So it's easy. If you have SharePoint, and if it's SharePoint Online, then you are probably on the newest release, which will look something very similar to this. The colors might be different. I'm using the dark theme, so that's why everything is kind of dark. But you will still have the top bar right here. And if you're in a list that can be synced to your machine, you'll see something called sync right here. All you have to do is click it. So if I click it, it will, and I'm going to cancel this because I don't want to sync this, but it will come up with this message. It's getting ready to sync. Now, it uses the same OneDrive for Business client that you use with your OneDrive. So it doesn't need to install anything new. All it's doing is simply syncing that file, right? Anything in that folder. So whether it's a subfolder or an entire list, it will sync it to your local machine. You can access these files, whether you're online, whether you're offline. If you're offline and you make some changes, and then when you regain connectivity, it will sync those changes back to SharePoint. So it's kind of seamless. Think of it like Dropbox for Business, right? It's similar to that, where you make a change, and once it detects connectivity, it will sync it back up to the list. Now, the good thing is, since it is an enterprise-based system, it will use the permissions the same way. It will use usernames, credentials, everything the same way. So here's an example. You know, this question comes in from a lot of in-house IT admins, where it's like, you know, hey, we have you know, servers, we have phone systems, we have email, we have all these different silos of information. When we hire a customer, I just want to create this customer in one place. Or when we fire a person, I want to just disable this user's access in one place. I don't want to have to touch 50 different things to disable the user's access. And actually, this point, you know, I was talking to a customer earlier today, an IT admin at a customer site, and this came up, and I was like, look, it's simple. Here's how you would do it. You would have your SharePoint, you would have your Outlook, everything is connected to Office 365. Now, if you have a domain controller in your office, then and you know, that domain controller, we enable MFA using Passly. So now everything is connected to Passly. So now all you have to do is you create a user in Passly, it automatically creates the user and the password into Office 365 and your domain, where whatever is connected. And now when you fire the person, you just disable that account in one place, all access goes away. Right. So it makes life a lot easier. And not only that, but it's also a good practice to have as small a number of management interfaces as possible. So with something like Passly, connecting on the backend single sign-on with Office 365, your domain or your local machine, your local accounts, You might have other third-party accounts out there. Maybe you have some websites and things like that that you need credentials to log into. You can connect all those into Pathly, and then when you disable an account, it disables it across everything that's connected in there. So it makes management a lot easier. Now, the thinking part, works, hand in hand with this, with this app. So once you have, let's say if you don't have Pathly and you don't have a domain, if you just have SharePoint and OneDrive, well, you can sync those SharePoint lists just like you can sync your OneDrive, and everything is seamless. So the scenario now is, you're in a hotel, you have your sync set up, you're working on a document. While you're working on a document with connectivity, that information is continuously in sync with SharePoint. Now you walk away and you lose connectivity. You're still working on that same document. Those changes stay on your local machine. They're cached locally. Next time you gain connectivity, it automatically syncs. So other people who are accessing these files, they will see the same changes as soon as you gain connectivity, and those changes replicate up to the cloud. So basically, it's a seamless process, and I use this almost on a daily basis. There are a few differences, like people talk about Google Docs and things like that. So the main thing to understand the differences is Google is coming from the consumer space, right? Google is coming from the consumer space where everything is more consumer focused. Microsoft is coming from the enterprise space. So there is a happy medium in between. That's where we need to meet. So Google has a very good Gmail email, browser interface, but it does not have a very good application that you can install on your machine for Gmail. Microsoft has that. But Microsoft, for the longest time, did not have a very good interface for web access of their email. But they're kind of moving towards that middle ground.
Right.
One of the recent things that Microsoft did that brought all of the Microsoft Office suite on par with Google Docs is the ability to share documents and work on documents. Basically, it's called co-authoring, working on a document at the same time with multiple users. So you were able to do that in Google for the longest time, coming from the consumer space, but you were not able to do that on the Microsoft side of things. And Microsoft wanted to enable it for the longest time, but they couldn't, because they couldn't do it with keeping the enterprise security in mind until they could technically, it was technically feasible. So now we are at a point where technologically it's feasible for multiple people to work on the same document at the same time, called co-authoring.
Wait, so are you talking about, for example, if I have a sheet in, for example, in our inside, we have an inside sales bucket, and the ability for me to see that you're looking at the same sheet I'm looking at, is that?
Yeah,
really?
and
Microsoft didn't have
making changes at the same time. So if I'm making changes, you'll actually see my initials on that change as I type it in. Yeah, it's real time. Yeah.
Really? Now, and it's funny, of course, everybody who's used Docs has seen that you're able to do that. I didn't know that Microsoft didn't have the ability to do that until recently.
Yeah. So historically, Microsoft did not have that. That's a recent development. And now that functionality has been there for a while now. I think almost a year now, and it's very robust. I mean, I actually rely on it day in and day out when I have to share documents with my team. I mean, we work on things collaboratively, and of course, Teams is a huge help along with that. We collaborate via video in Teams. We can have breakout sessions just like Zoom, and we can have co-authoring just like Google Docs, and so everything is kind of coming together. It's like it's more of a one app, one company is enabling us to do everything within its ecosystem.
That's interesting, especially as you talk about Teams. Now, it's funny, I didn't really even do anything with Teams until I started working with PCSN. And man, I can tell you, I mean, I prefer Teams over just about anything that's out there. I mean, Teams is just, to me, and maybe it's because I've been using. I think it's more. Ooh, this is kind of mean to say. Dummy proof. That's not nice. No, let me not say that. It's just easy. It's easy to use. It's
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
to use.
So it is easy to use, and so so you're thinking it's the ease of use. You're coming to Teams. I'm
Yeah,
using Teams because it connects different technologies together. It's the
yeah,
glue that connects different technologies together. For example, we can have our planner sheets connected in Teams. We can have our SharePoint connected in Teams. We can have multiple applications, whether they're web-based or fat applications, connected into Teams. So it's kind of like the glue that kind of brings everything together. And that was the whole goal for the Teams client that Microsoft was pushing, back when it used to be Skype for Business, and then they came up with the Teams client, and a lot of people were like, why is Microsoft doing this? I just like the Skype for Business client. It's just easy to use, and I know it. Everybody was fighting, but there was a reason behind that, and the reason was they wanted to have a flexible application that can bring and connect with multiple different types of technologies, and that's what Teams is doing for us. And I mean, I live in Teams all day long. I mean, it's I don't know what I would do without Teams. I mean, I would have to have like web like some sort of a web meeting. I would have to have a conference audio conference system. I would
yeah,
have to have a separate phone system.
yep,
I mean, and I would have to have Zoom for video calls.
yep.
uh, I mean, I would need so many different applications, and now all I have is Teams, and I can do everything because everything connects in Teams, and it works pretty well. But yeah, so I mean, we can actually start working on some of those sheets together because it's real time authoring. Now, here's the best part. So it's real time authoring, just like in Google Docs, you can open the document in browser and multiple people can work on it. But it's better because it works the same way if one person is in the regular Office application, like Microsoft Word on their desktop, and another person is in the web version of the application. So it really, the same functionality exists whether it's you're using the FAT client on your local machine or whether you're using the web client in a browser. It's the
Okay.
same functionality. And that's what Microsoft was holding back, bringing that functionality to the application, because they wanted to have a seamless experience no matter what the interface was. So that's why we had a longer time to get there. But now we're there, and some customers who are now coming into the Microsoft ecosystem from fresh, they assimilate into that, they adjust to it better than some customers who use the old Microsoft applications, like the older versions of Office, because some of the functionality you have to unlearn and then relearn new ways of doing things. But at the end of the day, it makes everybody more productive. It's I don't know what I would do without some of these technologies around here now. There is one technology, however, that I wish existed that doesn't exist now. Um, so in one of our meetings, it came up, and I started thinking, I need to keep better track of my time. I work on so many different things,
Yeah.
and sometimes I forget. I'll work on something and I'll forget, and I'm like, where did I spend half my day? And if only there was one application that can keep track of what I'm working on in context and keep track of all that so I can run some reports. Oh, that would make my life so much easier. Until we get to that point, I think I'm going to have to like create a spreadsheet and just manually keep track of what I'm doing. But
So are you saying that Microsoft doesn't have a man? I remember in the when I first really started getting into technology, there was something called workflow that was like the biggest thing where uh, essentially what I remember and is that if somebody was working on something, the processes by which they were working on it basically kept track. So Nadeem was working on this migration, he has blah blah blah, and you put check marks or whatever kind of whatever to hey, keep track of this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, completed. And across teams, you can actually see that. It was called workflow. I don't know what would be the equivalent to that now.
Yeah, so that's something called Microsoft Planner, and that's what we use internally for our projects. But it's more project focused, so it's not like, I want something that I don't have to tell it what I'm working on. It will figure out what I'm working on. I mean, I'm
Oh,
asking for some magic
that
here.
sounds like something. It's time for you to invent, Nadeem. It's
Well, but it's more like magic, because if it can just, because I mean, I work with multiple companies and multiple projects and multiple teams, and sometimes the domain I'm working in is totally different. So I could be working with in sales, I could be working in marketing, I could be working in engineering. It's so many different things. So if I didn't have to manually tell the app what I'm working on, and it just automatically magically knew what I was working on and learned from my behavior, because it knows my location, it knows if I'm sitting or standing, it knows so much data. But the problem is, all that data is still separate. For example, my location information is on my iPhone. My data, like what I'm working on, is in the Microsoft platform. uh and I work across 3 4 different companies, so it's like, how it's, I need that one thing that can control all that and keep track of all of that. It
oh,
doesn't exist.
looks like Nadeem is, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Looks like Nadeem is going to end up making something that's going to revolutionize keeping track of time. You heard it here first.
Well, if only I can make some time to do that. But no, it's been a great week, very productive week. I have my homework cut out for me for the weekend. I got so much to do. Uh, but Mac, I appreciate your time. I think we'll call it a day at that, and
Yep.
look forward to the weekend.
All right, guys. Everyone have a great weekend.
Have a great one, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Bye.
Be safe out there.